to hand you over to Mohammed to enlighten us with his views and his commitment, which is very much in line with our commitment to collaboration. Thank you very much.
I'll just start off by saying that I've prepared a much more serious speech than the ones that you've heard here, so I hope you'll indulge me for a few minutes. My lords and baronesses, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is with profound pleasure and a deep sense of humbleness that I stand before you today, amidst these magnificent historic halls, to speak at this unique event to launch Affinity as a collective hub for the construction industry in the United Kingdom. At the outset, I would like to thank my good friend Lord David Evans of Watford and the Honourable Richard Evans for allowing me the distinct privilege to be your keynote speaker today. Many of you may wonder, and rightly so, what value would an executive from a Kuwaiti-based construction company bring to the launch of a UK-based collaborative hub? What striking perspective could an outsider bring to propel our efforts at home? I come to you today from the Middle East, a region that continues to be fraught by turmoil and uprising, especially at this critical juncture in our collective human history. It is a region that is flustered with deeply rooted and convoluted historical conflicts, while conversely offering immeasurable opportunities for growth. It is a region that has both suffered and gained from its relationship with the United Kingdom over the past 3 centuries. Consequently, whether by design or inadvertence, our relationship and destinies have long been intertwined. The United Kingdom has positioned itself as an active participant in the shaping of Western political and economic influence on the global stage. In assuming such a position, the UK has both reaped the benefits and often paid the price that cojoins the perils of being at the epicenter of international decision-making. Its level of involvement, like a pendulum, has swung from absolute control in its former colonial outposts to withdrawal, whether total or partial. It is this latter position that concerns me today. In 1979, a former Prime Minister and member of this House, the late Baroness Thatcher, said in a speech to the Foreign Policy Association in New York, quote, "Today it is painfully obvious that no man, no nation is an island. What President Cleveland once described as foreign broils are brought into every home. The price of oil in Saudi Arabia and Nigeria, the size of grain harvest in Kansas and the Ukraine, these are of immediate concern to people all over the world. The Middle East and the Middle West have become neighbors and will remain so, uncomfortable though they may on occasion find it. The bell tolls for us all." End quote. It is this conundrum between fragility and dependency that the construction industry in both Britain and the world faces and shall continue to face over the years to come. Globally, the construction industry is tainted as an archaic business, one that is resistant to trends of automation and the least economic sector willing to embrace technology to perfect its daily operations. Construction executives are often confronted by a sense of apathy when negotiating with government officials, a perpetuated aloofness from financiers and financial institutions that often associate construction with risk and not benefit, and the anxiety of constituents and workers whose crafts and experiences are so closely connected with this industry. This tempestuous terrain, when compounded with the residual effects of COVID-19, ever-increasing inflation and interest rates that complicate a very volatile global supply chain, tends us to ask, why is it important for the UK or any other construction players in alternate countries to converge and unite at this point in time? Collective action is an imperative requisite to confront and plan for change. Platforms like Affinity are critical for the industry to communicate its agonies and to absorb and comprehend the concerns of its stakeholders. I shall recuse myself, if you allow me, from pointing out to the many professionals with us today what needs to be done here at home, but I hope you shall allow me just a few minutes to articulate my thoughts on how pivotal it is for the UK construction companies to expand globally with the right level of support. First, recent statistics around the UK's construction industry demonstrate an immediate demand to globalize this industry. The UK Trade and Business Commission, for example, announced in a report published in January 2023 that construction material costs increased 60% from 2015 to 2022 in the UK, while conversely in the EU witnessed only a 35% increase at that same point in time. And while Global Markets Insights projects the compounded annual growth rate for 2023 to 2032 at 3.5% in the UK, the global landscape, which is currently at $13.9 trillion, is foreseen to grow by 4.1 trillion for that same period. Simply put, the limited growth at home necessitates creating a clear path for growth abroad. Second, in a globalized world order where the dynamics of trade are witnessing extreme tectonic shifts, why is the UK losing its influence on a global scale? In December 2022, the Honourable James Cleverly, the UK's incumbent Foreign Secretary, reflected on this point by making the following remarks. Quote, "My goal is to build on the work of my predecessors and ensure that we do catch up. And under me, that task has begun. Our diplomats are not pundits in the commentary box, offering their thoughts and analyses. They are players on the field. The goal of foreign policy is not to comment, but to make a difference. Britain has agency. Britain has influence. Britain has leverage, and it is my job to use it." End quote. The UK's interests abroad can be significantly uplifted by deploying the soft power that could be wielded by augmenting the global footprint of its businesses. Propelling soft power on a global stage is not without its perils, but it is the most underrated form of diplomatic agency that the UK Foreign Secretary has committed to. It requires an extended investment horizon and the willingness and preparedness to offset the risks of potentially cataclysmic effect. The question is, can the UK afford to do otherwise? Consider, for example, that the UKEF limits its aggregate lending exposure to £50 billion. China, in contrast, in its effort to broaden the reach of its Belt and Road Initiative, spent $240 billion between 2008 and 2021 in the form of infrastructure emergency lending only. While it is true that China is a vastly larger economy than the United Kingdom, I argue that strategy should not be merely juxtaposed to size, but also to benefit. Infrastructure and construction contract support is a sustainable route to bolstering British business presence abroad, and to do so, it must be understood that the risk of doing business abroad cannot be absorbed by the private sector alone. Government support to mitigate sovereign and other types of credit risk are of profound importance to enticing UK businesses, especially construction companies, to compete on a global scale. My third and final point for today is to address the perils of persisting with a binary divide between geopolitical and economic diplomacy. If the UK's construction and other industries subscribe to the view that there is a deep imperative to regain the UK's global stature, it is critical to underscore that such an effort cannot exist in a vacuum. It cannot and will not be a successful endeavor without encompassing the interests of those nations it strives to expand in. Often, Business leaders around the world, and particularly from the Middle East, engage with UK officials who are eager to attract our foreign direct investments into the UK, but are rarely willing to effectively engage with us on our needs from British businesses. Partnership is not a one-way street. Economic benefit cannot be devoid of the political aspirations and realities of our nations. Our interdependence on British technology and business must also mean the commitment of Britain to our economies and interests. Failing to strike this equilibrium will mean that this expansion project could be construed and often propagated by others as a perversion of neocolonial growth. I would like to recall one of the 6 infamous maxims that I hold dear to my heart by Lord Gladstone on foreign policy, articulated at West Calder in 1879, in which he addressed the matter of equality among nations. Quote, "But in point of right, all are equal, and you have no right to set up a system under which one of them is to be placed under moral suspicion or espionage, or to be made the constant subject of invective. If you do that, but especially if you claim for yourself a superiority, a pharisaical superiority over the whole of them, then I say you may talk about your patriotism if you please, but you are a misjudging friend of your country." End quote. To conclude, and as someone who leads a group of family-owned businesses, I say that that planning for national economies in silos is a failed project. It limits the horizons of our collective human capacity and thwarts the reach of our institutions to strengthen our interests beyond our national territories. Today, I make an earnest call to all our friends in the UK construction industry. We are open to doing business with you and learning with and from you. In this, I am sure I not only speak for our own group, but many other construction groups in our region and elsewhere. I thank you very much for your most generous invitation, and I wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you, Mohammed, for that incredibly powerful, articulate speech.